Welcome to FPL Differential 11, a series where we pick a team of 11 lowly owned players who we predict to score the most points for the upcoming game week, to assist you in gaining substantial rank over other fantasy managers. There's just 3 rules. The squad must be worth no more than 82.5 million, each player must be owned by a maximum of 10% of total players in the game, and we're only allowed to pick a maximum of 3 players from a single team. A silhouette of each player we've selected is already on the pitch, so feel free to play along by seeing how many of the 11 you can correctly guess. First up in goal it's Jason Steele for Brighton's double game week against Leeds and Crystal Palace. Fantasy managers were understandably shocked to see a surprise benching for Sanchez last week, especially those who brought him in on a game week 26 wildcard. De Zerbi stated that Steele is playing closer to his liking than Sanchez, and with a clean sheet against West Ham, I expect him to start these 2 games. When it comes to goal scoring, both Leeds and Crystal Palace are teams that have been really struggling of late, and Brighton look to be the favourites to get a result in both of these fixtures. To kick off the 5-man defence, it's Rico Henry for Brentford's double game week away to Everton and Southampton. I'm recording this video prior to the Brentford-Fulham game on Monday night, but since the Premier League restart in December, Brentford have been one of the most impressive defences in the division, conceding only 5 goals and keeping 4 clean sheets. They're currently on an unbeaten run that spans back to game week 13, and Rico Henry looks to be one of the most nailed players to start across the Bees' back line. He's up against 2 teams in Everton and Southampton this week, who aren't prolific goal-scoring sides. Joining Henry is his Brentford teammate Ethan Pinnock for his double game week against Everton and Southampton. These look to be 2 very good fixtures from a defensive point of view for the Bees, which is why I've decided on doubling up on their defence. Pinnock looks likely to start both of these games, but one thing we should be wary of is the return of Pontus Jansson, who was of course Brentford's captain before his injury back in game week 9. Due to the fact it's a long-term injury, and Jansson is only just returning, his fitness isn't likely up to match standards, and so I would expect Pinnock is favoured to start both of these fixtures. Next up it's Andy Robertson for Liverpool's away match against Bournemouth. Robertson picked up a 9-pointer in what was a dominant display from Liverpool last week against Man United, in that impressive 7-0 win. What's promising is that Robertson returned an assist, his first attacking return since game week 17, and he looked threatening in that game, perhaps unfortunate not to pick up more FPL points. He's now started 7 of Liverpool's last 8 Premier League matches, so he looks fairly nailed to start in a team that seems to be on the up. Estupiñán joins the back line for his double game week versus Leeds and Crystal Palace. With his clean sheet against West Ham in game week 26, Estupiñán has now returned in each of his last 6 Premier League matches. With Brighton's lack of defensive options, I expect him to continue starting in that left wing position, and with the Seagulls' relentless attacking output, there's no reason why he couldn't return big this game week. Recently, we've also seen Estupiñán being withdrawn 20 to 30 minutes before the end of the game, which could allow him to pick up his clean sheet points, even if Brighton were to concede late on. Although Man United lost badly last week against Liverpool, we shouldn't ignore their good form of late, and next week they come against a poor Southampton side who struggle to score goals. Dalot seems to have cemented his place at right back again after returning from injury, and he does find himself fairly advanced up the pitch at times. Before the Liverpool match, Man United had one of the best defensive records in the division, and I expect them to revert back to their dominant selves playing back at Old Trafford. Dalot returned 11 points in the reverse fixture earlier on in the season, so let's see if he's able to recreate that come the weekend. Next up it's Son for Tottenham's home game versus Nottingham Forest. After a couple of benchings in a row, Son came back into the Spurs starting lineup last week against Wolves and was unlucky not to return in that game, especially after seeing his shot come back off of the crossbar. Although Tottenham's form has been inconsistent this season, they have pulled off some impressive wins against the likes of Manchester City, Fulham and Chelsea of late, and you would expect them to create multiple goal scoring opportunities versus Forest. They'll probably be playing on the front foot, as 4th spot in the table is still very much up for grabs. It was a good call to include Alexis Mac Allister in the differential 11 last week for his 14-point haul against West Ham, and he joins the team this week for his 2 games against Leeds and Crystal Palace. As I explained last week, following Adam Lallana's injury, Mac Allister was moved further up the pitch to play a number 10 role in behind the striker, and his goal involvement numbers have drastically increased as a result. If Mac Allister were able to get 2 sets of 90 minutes against these sides playing that same role, I would say he's arguably the best captain option this game week. With 3 goals and 5 assists since game week 17, Bruno Fernandes has been one of the form players of the league, and I feel like I have to select him in the team this week for Man United's home game against Southampton. Although United were well and truly beaten by Liverpool last week, you'd expect them to bounce back and play on the front foot against the Saints on Sunday. Fernandes has been one of the team's most creative players this season, and he'll probably create a ton of chances this game week. We found out earlier in the season that he's also on penalties, and I just think that adds to his appeal as a great FPL asset to own this weekend. After pleading guilty to breaking multiple FA betting rules, Ivan Toney's future in the Brentford starting lineup is very much in the air, which could make Bryan Mbeumo a better or worse pick for this week. Mbeumo has been ticking away with FPL points this season, with 5 goals and 4 assists, and we know he has multiple routes to points through free kicks, corners, open play, and now even potentially penalties. I feel like I have to include him here for his double game week, as both Southampton and Everton have been leaky in the defensive department at times this season, and Mbeumo seems nailed to start in both of these fixtures. The final player to make the differential 11 is definitely a bit of a punt, and it's Roberto Firmino for Liverpool's away trip to Bournemouth. Even though Firmino was only on the pitch for 11 minutes versus Man United last week, he was able to grab himself a goal and an assist. In the reverse fixture against Bournemouth earlier in the season, Firmino scored an impressive 22 FPL points. Although he hasn't started a match since game week 16, I feel like this week is the perfect time for him to come back into the side, as Liverpool have a second leg Champions League tie against Real Madrid on the 15th of March, and Klopp might want to rest a few of his regulars for that encounter. A massive congrats to this week's king of the channel, Chat Stop Football, for correctly predicting the score of last week's differential 11. Nice one, mate. If you want to be in with a chance of winning a shout out on the channel, correctly predict the points total of this week's differential 11. Info will be down below in the pinned comment. Thanks for joining us on this week's video. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to avoid missing the next one, and I wish you all massive green arrows for the upcoming game week.